Grace Gwen, reading aloud for you from my novel, His Christmas Eve Proposal, Book 3 of the Medicine Women of Alaska, Chapter 2. Naomi Schuster's arms, legs, and back ached from her time bent over the flower planter, but it was a good ache, and she walked back inside her office with a light step, heading to the break room. She disrobed quickly and jumped into the portable shower she'd installed where once a broom closet was located. She ran her fingers through her hair as she stepped out of the shower, darted into her small office, and slipped on a fresh set of scrubs. There, she felt better already. She sat down at her desk and turned to her files when a sudden pounding at her front door made her jump. She stood up and hurried to open it. A gorgeous man who reminded her very much of Ricardo, her former fiancé, stood on the front stoop, glowering at her. I thought I did everything in my power to get away from Ricardo. A host of painful memories assailed her, reminding her why she'd escaped Los Angeles in the first place. To travel 3,000 miles and find herself right back where she started from, and gazing at a man who looked exactly like her former lover, it shook her to her core. Hi, she said a bit uncertainly. I'm not open right now. I know that, he said coldly. That's not why I'm here. You're not a reporter, are you? She asked, taking a step back. What? I beg your pardon, she said. We need to talk. Not with that unpleasant attitude, we don't. She moved to close the door, but he blocked it with his shoulder. Look, she said, I'm not afraid to call the police. He reared his head back, shocked. Is that how you treat your patients? Somehow, she said tartly, I get the impression you're not a patient. Without bothering to introduce himself, he said, You're Dr. Schuster. It sounded like a challenge. Yes, I am. And you are? Do you have a staff already in place? She was liking this guy less and less with every passing minute. I'm not sure that's any of your business, he pressed on with heat. Well, I just wanted to let you know that I don't like you stealing my patients. You'd better not pull the same stunt on my staff. My nurse, Phyllis Reynolds, she's devoted to me and will never leave me, even if all my patients leave me in droves. Hold on a second. She shook her head. Who are you? I'm Dr. Rutherford, and up until about 5 minutes ago, Dr. Schuster, I was the primary physician for Mrs. Darjeeling and her twins. Wait a minute. I thought Dr. Rutherford was in his 80s and had just retired. This caused him a moment's discomfort. Oh, no. My father passed away a few years ago. Well, I can't be blamed if my intel is wrong, she said. Now, considering how you didn't even have the good manners to properly introduce yourself to me, and as I'm not comfortable with an angry man standing on my doorstep bellowing at me, I'm hardly bellowing, and especially as you've blocked me from closing this door, I'm going to tell you one more time, Dr. Rutherford, which I presume is your name, that if you wish to speak with me in a civil manner, you can make an appointment with my nurse. You've got a nurse? She tamped down her anger. What in the world was the matter with this guy? I'm interviewing candidates. Just don't poach my nurse. All right, that's enough. She stepped forward and pressed her left front finger into his solar plexus. I want you to understand something. Yes, I'll do whatever the heck I want, including stealing my patients. And you can take yourself and your crummy, crappy attitude and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Okay. And this is the last time I'm telling you to get off my front step. Got it? And then she did something really mean. She pushed hard, and he stumbled off the stoop, and she had to wonder a bit at her behavior. For in the second that he lost his balance, she regretted her bad temper and worried that she'd hurt him. But no, thankfully. He hopped off the step and stood on the street, gazing up at her with a look of frank surprise. And we are done. She slammed the door shut in his face and locked it. So there. She stood in her waiting room with her ear pressed up against the door. Not one sound, not one peep. Crickets. She wandered over to the window and peeked between the blinds, and there he stood in the street, his hands fisted in his pockets, gazing up at her front door. Dang, he was cute. Too bad he's such a freaking jerk. Still, though, he sure wasn't making any move to leave. Did he want to talk to her? She did kind of want to talk to him, find out what made him tick. At last, he broke free of his reverie. He rubbed his right hand across his face and appeared to recollect himself. He inhaled and let his breath out slowly and stepped gingerly up to her stoop, the one she'd just pushed him off of, and raised his hand as if to knock on the door, then stopped midair. She took first one step to the door, then another, waiting for him to knock again while wondering, did she really want to talk to this arrogant jerk? Yeah. But then, to her regret, he turned on his heel and walked away from the door and from her. She lunged for the door and flung it open. She stood in the doorway and smiled. Hey! He whirled around and looked at her, and was it her imagination, or did he smile back? They stood too far away for her to see the effect on his pupils, but she thought she detected a trace of his smile quivering across his lips. Hey, he said back. She held the door open wide and gestured. If you're willing to conduct yourself as a gentleman, I shall permit you to enter. He grinned. Ah, a gentleman, eh? Someone's been reading up on her Jane Austen. Okay, now he had her. He'd caught her reference to a pivotal line from Jane Austen's novel, Pride and Prejudice. In the scene where Elizabeth Bennet tells Mr. Darcy that she would have had a harder time refusing him if he'd conducted himself as a gentleman. What a cool guy to know the literary reference. Her estimation of him rose many degrees. It's a rare man who recognizes a Jane Austen reference, and a rarer one still who has the nerve to own up to it. Drew walked into her waiting room with his hands still shoved deeply inside his pockets and a smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. Are you saying I'm a Renaissance man? I might be. She plopped down into one of her new waiting room chairs and gazed at him. Sit. I shall obey your order. He sat down. Speak. Yes, ma'am. I suppose I've earned this sharp treatment? Indeed you have. Now tell me your history. I'm Dr. Drew Rutherford. My father, whom someone must have told you was running the practice, did run it for 40 years. Charles Rutherford died a few years ago, and before he died, he asked me to help him until he got back on his feet again. A sad, faraway look passed across his features. All right, that explains my confusion. I thought Dr. Rutherford was an elderly and distinguished man. And not me? He asked with an upraised eyebrow. That's right. My turn. I'm Dr. Naomi Schuster. I'm new here. I haven't even opened my medical practice yet, and already I've angered you, for I've poached 2 patients of yours? Yes, he said with discomfort. Yes, and I was coming over here to ask you nicely not to do that to me, poach any more of my patients because, well, it upsets me. His brown eyes twinkled, and I didn't handle it well. You got that straight, Buster, she said, but without rancor. Anyway, please don't poach my patients. I can't help it if your patients don't like you. This is a free country, and Mrs. Darjeeling just walked in here, announced that she wanted her daughters to be treated by a woman doctor who understood her girls, her words, not mine, and transferred her daughters' charts to me. A little of her former anger rose up in her heart as she gazed raptly at him. It's common courtesy, he said, not to go around stealing another doctor's patients when the patients have been the patients of the doctor for many, many years. I'm afraid that ship has sailed, Dr. Rutherford, when it comes to the Darjeeling twins. I met them while grocery shopping. Their mother noticed a new face in the produce aisle and approached me to introduce herself. When the girls learned I was a doctor, they told their mother they wanted me. He mused. You poached my patients in the produce aisle? Yes, it was all very underhanded. Let me see, how did they put it? We're tired of grumpy old Dr. Rutherford. And I'm speaking verbatim when I say that. His mouth dropped open. I'm not old, and I'm certainly not grumpy. Ha! Judging from your past behavior with me, you make the Grinch look like the Easter Bunny. Okay, then. I've lost the Darjeeling twins. Did you know that I helped deliver them? And I'm sure they appreciate it. They're growing up into young women, Dr. Rutherford. It's hard for a teenager to discuss women's issues with a male doctor. True, he admitted. But he still looked nettled. Are we okay, Dr. Rutherford? We're going to have to be, Dr. Schuster. I'm just warning you, though. You steal any more of my patients, and it will be war. She threw her head back and roared with laughter. I like this challenge. He stood up, chuckling, and walked to the door. Dr. Schuster, it was a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Of course, Dr. Rutherford, she said with extravagant gallantry. Don't mention it. He opened the front door, turned to look at her one last time, then closed it. She ran over to the window and peeked through the blinds as he walked away. He was a mighty good-looking man. And if she hadn't promised herself to stay away from men for the foreseeable future, she might have been tempted to date him had he asked. But not, she decided, with this guy's magnificent attitude. She'd be wise to give him a wide berth.